Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with you again. My name is Maris Skujins. I work here at ScannerWeb as Business Development Executive. And today I have with me Lauren Flanigan, who's the Senior Brand Manager at OREO. Hello, Lauren. You are working for a brand who perhaps many people are jealous that you are working for. It's a delicious brand. Everybody knows that. So many people love it. Um, Tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do at Oreo? What are your daily tasks? And what does your daily life look like?
Yeah, sure. So thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today to talk all things Oreo and influencer. As you mentioned, I'm Senior Brand Manager of Oreo, which is a sub-brand of the parent company Mondelez. So Mondelez has a number of different brands, including Oreo, others that are probably pretty well known, Ritz, Sour Patch Kids, Cadbury chocolate, which I know a lot of our friends here on the call are in Europe. So I'm sure you guys are well familiar with that brand in particular. But yes, I've been with Mondelez for about 6 years now and have worked on a variety of different brands, including Trident Gum, Sour Patch Kids, Nutter Butter, Nilla, and the Belvita breakfast biscuits. So really excited to be here today.
All right, great. Last year has been strange in many ways, more than one. Uh, Tell us a little bit. What were the challenges? What the team face regarding to growing the brand at this stay-at-home period?
Mhm. Yes, it was definitely a crazy year. I'm sure we could all relate to that. I think what was interesting from a brand and product standpoint in general is the year really impacted brands differently depending on the use, depending on the emotional connection, depending on kind of what the benefit of the product was. And so I mentioned I'd worked on a couple of different Mondelez, including Oreo. And prior to that, I was actually working on Trident Gum. I think even between those two, we saw really different impacts from people staying at home. And I think with Oreo, it's definitely a brand that people feel really comforted by. It's something that they have familiarity with, either from having those childhood rituals with their family. It provides sort of an emotional comfort for people. So we definitely saw people turning to brands that they trust, and Oreo is a super trusted brand. It's actually the number one most trusted brand amongst Gen Z. So we definitely saw a trend in which consumption was significantly up for Oreo during the stay-at-home period. So I think that that was one thing that worked in our favor. I think some things that we faced that were challenging: production and really kind of rethinking the way that we advertise and the way that we put content out there, which is super relevant as we think about influencers and even UGC, which I think is somewhat related to influencer strategy as well. And so we, like many other brands, face the limitation of not being able to have the productions that we were used to, especially at the beginning of the pandemic and the stay-at-home period. So we actually did need to pivot our strategy in terms of what content we were creating, and that did actually land us in a space of leveraging UGC and influencer, particularly towards the beginning of the stay-at-home period.
So during the recent time, Oreo has worked a lot with influencer marketing. So that was a conscious strategy, right?
Absolutely, for sure. I think Oreo, of course, is a really storied brand. It's been around for over 100 years at this point. And, you know, it's such a privilege to be able to work on a brand that has that kind of history. And I think what comes along with that sort of history, one of the biggest challenges is ensuring that it continues to be relevant in pop culture and culture at large. And so a big piece of that relevance is really there's a couple of different ways in for that, including social purpose, including reflecting our consumers in our creative, including all the new flavor launches that we've done, but also influencers and tapping into communities of people to really ensure that our product and whatever that we're putting out into the world really does have that meaning and relevance at a level that feels really empathetic to the consumer.
Of course, influencerism in general is a very hot topic right now. More and more brands keep on adapting that marketing strategy. Can you give us an insight of a recent campaign or a review of an idea? What you've done recently with influencer marketing?
Yeah, so there's a few things. I think if we're looking over kind of the history of the brand, we've looked at influencer at all ends of the spectrum. I think everything from kind of like your micro influencers all the way up to global celebrities and even things that you wouldn't necessarily immediately put into the bucket of influencer, like some of the brand partnerships that we've done as well. And so I think influencer has definitely been a very conscious strategy for us. As I mentioned, relevance is a really big focus for us, especially with a brand with such rich history. Keeping it relevant is really important. And so we know that one way to be really authentic and being relevant is to reach people with other voices and other equities that resonate with those groups. And so most recently, you guys may have heard of the very small thing we did with Lady Gaga, which was a really fun project to work on, where we had the Lady Gaga Chromatica themed Oreos. Obviously, she's a huge global celebrity with a massive following and a super fandom. So really a pleasure to work on that project. But yeah, I think that's definitely the most recent that we've done. In the past, we've done brand partnerships that we sort of consider to be influencer as well. So Game of Thrones Oreo, you may have heard of as well, or the Supreme Oreo we did a little bit ago also. So definitely been a very conscious part of our strategy and something we're really excited to continue to build on.
Lady Gaga, she doesn't spring to mind as the first choice for a brand like Oreo. I would probably think more Snoop, perhaps. What's the idea behind it? Did you try to reach new audiences, or were there some other secret sources behind it?
Yeah, it is really interesting. And we get that a lot. Just it doesn't seem like the most obvious or most immediate partnership. But if you think about it at its core, it actually, we really do have a lot of similar shared values. And that's really what led to the partnership. So we actually began the relationship from a place of philanthropy and actually wanting to partner with her foundation. And that actually lent itself to a much bigger opportunity to work together at a greater level. And so one thing that's really important to Oreo and our brand values is really inclusivity and making sure that, you know, we represent families of all kind and that we really speak to just the beautiful diversity that we all have in the world. And so a big part of that has also been our allyship with LGBTQ plus community. And obviously Lady Gaga is a huge advocate in this space as well. And so that's, if we're looking at kind of the core of our shared values of inclusivity, and for Oreo, it's playfulness, for Lady Gaga, it's kindness. There's really a lot of similarities in our values and in what we hope to kind of put out into the world. So I think while it at the surface looks very different, fundamentally, those core beliefs are there. And I think that's actually what made it such a great partnership.
I have a question from audience. Will we ever see Lady Gaga cookies in Europe?
I never say never. I would say that probably not this year. I could say that, but we did actually have a similar promotion in Europe, but we weren't able to get the cookies there for you guys. But never say never.
All right, I'll have to look out for at the stores for that pink packaging. Um, Nowadays, people have shorter and shorter attention spans with huge campaigns like working with Lady Gaga. Obviously, it involves a lot of planning, a lot of effort. There's probably significant financial part behind it as well. How do you keep the attention span of the audience throughout the campaign so it doesn't die off in the early days?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think being really strategic about when you announce what news is really key. And I think finding ways to keep people engaged throughout it. So just pointing back to the Lady Gaga example, we announced the product in December, but we didn't actually launch the broader campaign and on shelf date for the cookies until about February. And so that was obviously a big kind of period of time to be able to keep people interested. And so we did things along the way to make sure that we maintained that momentum, whether it was teasing the date, or eventually we actually did a virtual cookie hunt, which we hosted on Twitter and had clues hidden all throughout the Twitterverse for people to have a chance to win an autographed pack of Lady Gaga cookies. So I definitely think being smart up front and having a plan ahead of it of when you want to pulse out news to be able to keep it fresh and to have different headlines and different reasons for coming out with news. I think thinking of that ahead of time is definitely really key to maintaining the momentum.
So, with the pandemic and a lot of people staying at home, what content currently resonates with consumers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that that definitely varies. I think family time is definitely something we've seen as a theme and activities that bring families together. So, for example, with Oreo, we saw a ton of recipe use, which is something that's really kind of native to the brand. It's something that people do when they're interacting with the brand. Recipes is a really big part of that. But as people were staying home and looking for activities to do, we definitely saw an increase in some conversation around Oreo recipes. So I would say it definitely varies depending on the brand and depending on what what the brand can bring to the table as a benefit. But what I would say is a consistent theme is during the stay-at-home period, people have been looking for ways to feel uplifted, to feel connected to their families, to find activities that are safe to do. And I think the value that brands can bring there is welcomed. I think if you are a brand that people feel comforted by, continuing to lean into that feeling of uplift and feeling empowered, I think is really useful. And I think there's definitely a role to play in being able to be there for consumers and help them to make it through what was a tough time.
So you did mention as well that the collaboration with Lady Gaga actually started off with um, helping the communities, and I believe and I understand that's something that's important for the Oreo brand itself. Is it important for the brand to stay true to its values, or is that the sort of a content that people actually like to engage with as well?
Mm-hmm. It's both for sure. I definitely think it's something that the brand values. I would say that it's something that our leadership as a whole also values. I think social purpose is also something that consumers are looking for. I think, especially if we're talking about Gen Z, it's something that they want to hold brands accountable for, whether that's sustainability, whether it's standing up for particular communities. I think it is something that we personally feel really passionate about. It's been a part of the brand's DNA, but I do think there's an increasing trend of consumers demanding this from brands. It's no longer enough to just sell the product. People want to know the meat behind it, and they feel more invested in the brands that they are spending time with or the brands that they're engaging with. It eventually becomes a statement of their own personal identity. Is something we're also seeing with Gen Z is that they choose to support brands that align with their values as well. So I definitely think, it's definitely table stakes with Gen Z. I would also say what's really interesting with purpose work is that it really does allow you to have a much deeper resonance with different communities as well. And the more you can authentically speak to groups and really be able to advocate for these communities and really have an invested interest in what's going on and what impacts them, I also think it just really feels very empathetic and it makes for better marketing and a better brand love, brand connection from the consumer.
Thinking about the Gen Z there, you did launch a scavenger hunt as a part of the campaign. Can you go into a little bit more detail there?
Yes, it was one of the most fun things ever to work on. Lady Gaga was a great partner in this, and we actually had autographed packs from her. And we were thinking about how to make the best use of them. We really wanted to really use it to drive buzz, and we wanted to do something right at the moment just before the packs were going to hit shelf. And so this was still during the COVID context, and we wanted to be responsible about where we were driving traffic and wanted to be responsible that we weren't driving hordes of crowds to any particular store or any large gatherings. And so the idea pre-COVID was to have some sort of a physical stunt that we could do, but that needed to pivot to be something virtual. And so we started to really think about how you can scale something virtually and how you can have that sort of engagement. And it really felt supernatural to just have this actually launch on Twitter. So what we did was we partnered with a couple of other influencers and we punned a lot of the names of Lady Gaga's album. So for example, we worked with Jay Leno to pun the song Fun Tonight, and had a couple of other celebrity influencers that we partnered with that had some sort of fun pun related to her songs. And essentially we hid little clues all across Twitter, starting with kicking off of Lady Gaga. Our own socials also kind of engaged with it as well. And essentially, if you found all 6 clues that we hid in Twitter, you would then be eligible to be entered for a chance to win one of those packs. So extremely fun, really great results on it. We actually trended at number 10 in the US on Twitter. It was the second time actually with this project we trended in the top 25. So definitely extremely resonant with consumers and just a ton of fun, and really also was something that just brought some surprise and delight to consumers. Again, it was, in the context of these COVID times, people want something to feel uplifted. They want to feel, engaged with something that feels a little bit more fun and a little bit more lighthearted. So we were able to provide that value of just surprise and delight and really igniting Lady Gaga's super fan base. So a lot of fun with really stellar results.
During the eCOM360 conference, over and over again comes the direct-to-consumer terminology. So OREO, I can see, is a brand that is working directly to the consumers on many layers of communication, from social media to advertising, and actually physically engaging with your through activities and through influencerism. How do you see and feel how does it benefit the brand driving these values back into the community?
Sorry, you cut out for me a little bit, classic Zoom issue. But I think that what you're saying is, how do these partnerships drive value for the brand?
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, great. So yeah, so
And then
I definitely think
excuse me, and how does the communication directly to the consumer and engaging with the consumer, how does that drive value for the brand particularly?
Got it. Yeah. So I think very practically, it's being able to give people something that they personally connect to. And I think if you kind of look at like the history of some of our launches, we've really tapped into community. So Lady Gaga obviously has a huge fandom. Music in general is something that we've done a lot of work with, and we've seen people have a really deep connection to music and to their favorite artists. So Lady Gaga was one. In the past, we've worked with Wiz Khalifa. That taps into another particular community. Even if you're thinking about Game of Thrones, OREO, that was a huge cultural moment that people really felt a deep resonance to. And the same with Supreme OREO that we did a little while ago also. And I think the value that it brings back to the brand is a couple of things. I think very practically, when people feel passionately about something, I mean, Game of Thrones OREO and Lady Gaga OREO are definitely two of our fastest turning SKUs in the history of any brand launch. And it's because you really tapped into a cultural moment. So practically, it definitely helps to drive sales because it's new, it's newsworthy. People want to feel like this. It feels like a collectible item to people. So I think that's a very practical thing, is that it does help to drive sales. But I think what is the longer term benefit, and probably arguably maybe even the more valuable benefit, is that it connects the brand back to people's personal interests, their personal passions. And I think that over time continues to keep the brand relevant. It continues to drive brand love among consumers. And it just provides a sense of community amongst these groups, as well as they're able to kind of bond over this moment. So I definitely think there's layers of the very practical from driving sales, which you also see does have benefits back to the base business as you have news on the brand in general, and then over to a little bit more intangible things of having longer term brand love and having deeper resonance and relevance with very specific groups in a very empathetic way.
Talking here about huge celebrities and big influencers, there are many companies and many brands that have tried influencer marketing, some successfully, some unsuccessfully. You did mention that you work with smaller influencers as well. Can you give us a bit of an insight to the approaching the right partnership? What is the secret sauce to the right partnership? How do you choose what influencer is right for me as a company? Can you share that with other entrepreneurs to share the background? What is the secret there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely not everybody has an OREO sized budget. So I definitely understand that. And I actually think it's totally okay. We have worked with levels of influencers all the way to, people who maybe have just a couple 10,000 followers, all the way to a Lady Gaga. And I think honestly, every range within that has a role to play and can be super impactful depending on the objective of the campaign. And I think where we've seen smaller tier celebrities work extremely well is in a couple of places. I think when you're looking to feel really authentic, actually going smaller is better. So if you're communicating a message that's really specific to a community, for example, we just launched gluten-free Oreo, and it was met with a lot of excitement across a lot of groups, but it was intended for those in particular who have celiac or who can't eat, wheat-based products otherwise. And so what we did with that launch is we did tap into the influencer communities there, and they're not of the Lady Gaga level, but they definitely have a significant amount of credibility and authenticity in the gluten-free community. And that was, done really strategically to make sure that there was trust. Also in the product, in that this community felt like, it was truly gluten-free certified, and really being able to get out that message in a way that people felt really were able to connect to. So I think in that instance, as well as in thinking about purpose work and cause work, social purpose work, there's also a lot of benefit to going smaller scale as well. If you think about communities that you're speaking to, and leaders in those communities and other voices in those communities, having a more small scale presence actually really helps to drive authenticity. So I absolutely think there's a range, and I absolutely think that each of them has its own place, and it has its own kind of objective behind it as well. So I definitely wouldn't say that to do it right, you need a huge budget or you need to have a mega celebrity. And I actually think that there's benefits to both depending on the objective.
What are perhaps a couple of common mistakes, or either out of your experience or what you've seen with other brands, to stay out from or look out for while looking at the right partnership?
Yeah, so I think we're really fortunate on Oreo to have an amazing team of agencies behind us, including Weber from a PR standpoint, 360i Digital Social, and our AOR TMA, and a few others as well. But I think what's really great is we have had the ability to do really significant due diligence through a lot of those teams. And I definitely think that's a very important step, is really understanding who you're partnering with, both in terms of who they are, in terms of content that they've put out in the past. One thing that's really important for us is ensuring that we're partnering with people who mirror our values. And so I think doing the due diligence and ideally having great agency partners that can help with that is really key to having success. And I think other than that, really starting with the values, like it won't feel authentic if you feel misaligned in some way. So I would definitely say starting there is good practice. And when I've seen things go wrong, it's because something didn't align. I think the other thing that I've seen when things haven't worked out as well is essentially when you're not allowing the voice of that influencer to come through as well. And it's definitely a balancing act. Obviously, you want for the brand to be able to sing and have its own presence, but you do need to kind of balance that with the message as well as the voice of the influencer you're partnered with. So I think starting with the right values, having someone that aligns with previous messaging that you've put out also betters your chances of it feeling really authentic and it not feeling like either is having to fight the other for the right message.
All right. So when working with social media influencers, the first few platforms that do spring to mind, of course, are Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, perhaps. What other platforms are there? Do you work with other platforms like TikTok, maybe Clubhouse? Are there any other channels that you're looking out for?
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yeah, I actually think having variety in platform and thinking platform first is another really key component to success. So what we've seen is that what works for us on Twitter isn't always the same thing that works for us on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or TikTok. And so thinking with that platform first mentality of what is the feeling that you want to go for, because each of them has its own. Like with Twitter, it's a news space. So people want to hear the exciting new news, or if it's TikTok, people are going there to be entertained. And so in thinking about what the platform use is, it really helps to kind of focus what type of influencer do I want to work with, and what type of message am I trying to get them to carry. And so absolutely, we definitely work with, the kind of typical partners like a Google, a YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We also have started to do more work with TikTok. And we've seen a lot of really great success there as well, especially if we're thinking about obviously engaging the younger generation, Gen Z, pulling them in closer. We've also seen UGC pulled from TikTok be really interesting and really just fun content that we're able to kind of be inspired by and repost as well. So definitely TikTok is a growing platform, which I think has a lot of really interesting kind of learning right now, and it's a fun space to play in. But definitely, I think having a broad sense of platforms and having that platform first mentality of what's the message I want and where is it going to best resonate and who can I then partner with on that platform is definitely an important lens.
Have you had any thoughts perhaps going into other platforms like Clubhouse, which is lately been blowing up?
Yeah, so not yet. I think we're definitely keeping an eye on it. I myself am on Clubhouse and I'm enjoying dropping into these different little conversations. I think we're still right now in a listening and learning phase with Clubhouse. I think there's interest in, of course, continuing to just be on top of wherever it is that people may be going next. I think right now though, it's a listen and learn approach with Clubhouse.
Time to start working with a platform, or when is the right time to start working with an influencer marketing for a brand?
I don't think there is a right time. I think when you are really clear, I think it's less time and more stage in where you are as a brand. Like, do you really understand your brand strategy, your brand voice? Are you crystal clear on what objectives you have for the business as well as for your values as a brand? And I think once those things are clear, I think you can, assume a little bit more risk in terms of trying that new platform or working with a new influencer, as long as you've kind of done the due diligence and you have a real reason for doing it. I think that reason why is really more important than a specific time.
What I hear there is the merchants and the brands should do their homework first. They have to understand themselves before they can communicate the message that they carry out to the broader world. So, of course, we know that influencer marketing is growing and is projected to continue to grow over the years to come. Video content has been particularly well consumed over some time. What trends or consumer trends do you see as going forward into the post-pandemic world in the next year or 2 years to come forward? So video has been on a massive way up. What's next to look out for?
That's a great question. I would definitely say, of course, delivery. I think delivery in general is here to stay, and that kind of convenience factor will be really important to people. I do think video, I think TikTok obviously saw a lot of growth during the pandemic. I think that will be sustained as well in terms of consumer usage. I also think in terms of values, actually, values and behaviors, I think people have really rethought a lot over the past year, just in terms of what's important to them. And I think we've seen, obviously, with the pandemic, but we've also seen a lot of conversation around social change, especially here in the US. Obviously, just yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. There's also a lot of conversations around Stop Asian Hate. And I think that we have really come to kind of a new awareness of what we're doing as people and what good we can bring to the world. So I think that will be something that will actually continue to be a part of the zeitgeist. And I think that as we become more socially conscious, having that social presence and understanding some sort of purpose or cause for your brand, I think will actually continue to be important, if not more important.
You're talking about purpose and cause. Do you think bringing politics into the digital marketing is the right step forward?
Ooh, that's tricky. That's a really tough question. I think that I don't know if it's politics. I would say it's the right thing. And I think those can be separate. And I definitely think the role of a brand is not necessarily to be judge or jury, and it's not necessarily to advocate for any particular political party over the other. I think it's more playing a role of standing up for what's right and doing it in a way that feels politically impartial, which I do think is a nuance, but I do think it is something that can be achieved.
All right. And from your personal work-related experience, do you have any advice to your peers, partners, colleagues, competitors, fellow audience who are listening out today?
Yeah, so I definitely would just say continue to be curious. I think having a curious mindset, especially in marketing, is really important. And I think being curious about platforms, being curious about other cultures, being curious about what's changing in culture, what's changing in pop culture, what's new. I think having that fresh outlook is really important to keeping your brand fresh as well. So I would say if there's something that you don't know about that's being talked about in the news, educate yourself, whether that be some of the social issues that could impact your brand, whether that be just, who this new artist may be that's emerging on TikTok. I think having a curious attitude is really key to being a fresh and good marketer for sure. And I would just say, reach out to your peers, have conversations like this. Everyone has a different perspective. Everyone comes from, their own angle. And I think that's what makes really great marketing as well, is just having diversity of thought, diversity of perspectives and experiences. So be curious and just talk to people.
It sounds amazing because I believe and I can see that Oreo is actually a brand that is talking broadly across different communities. It's been widely accepted in many different countries. You go anywhere from Thailand to USA, and you'll always find an Oreo on the first shelf of 7-Eleven. So I think you guys done a great job there. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I say thank you very much for the insights. I hope the audience also find it very useful as I do. So, Lauren, thank you. Any last thoughts, messages that you want to share with the audience?
No, just it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you guys again for having me. I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn if there's other questions, and just really excited to see all the great work to come from everyone attending here and the other speakers as well.
Thank you, Lauren.